So I was asked to talk about some of the principles behind quality placemaking and the metrics that goes with the added value, if you like, of land stewardship, and with reference to Poundbury, because after all, we are here in Dorset. For those who don't know, I'm sure most of you do, but it is an urban extension of the county town. Dorchester, 400 acres, 250 of which is development, 150 green space. Ben was making reference earlier, Ben Pentruce, to how replicable something like this is, and it's a fair point. I mean, it's incredibly successful by every measure you take to it, but it's seen as something of maybe a Fabergé egg, a gilded lily as far as the house building profession would have it. And I think it's really about a vibrant, mixed-use, mixed-income, walkable community. Those are principles of good design, regardless, if you like, of the attention to detail in the architecture itself. And it's that example of good growth and the added value of that good growth that I want to focus on. So how does good growth work? What does it look like, and how is it achieved? And it does start with the landowner, but also the blueprint, this master plan. This master plan sets the standard. Poundbury is 40 miles from the nearest motorway. It's not the obvious place to start a business, but if you look on the right-hand side there, 50% of those businesses started on Poundbury. Those jobs do not include the construction jobs. The full-time equivalent is about 1,700, but that includes the part-time jobs there. So it's currently about 1.3 jobs per home. The rateable value is essentially the income derived from the commercial for a landed estate. That's a significant number. But the policy here is about weaving those spaces into that master plan to create a more walkable community. Most of those places are within 5-10 minute walk of your front door. And that's the point. You lose people if they tend to jump in the car and go to the out-of-town shopping centre. Now, this was an example. I'm a bit nervous about using it because I don't actually know the scheme, but the comparison was made by Knight Frank in their recent report, Cost and Value. This was a report commissioned for the Beauty Commission themselves, and as you can see, it's a lost opportunity. It's next to the M3. There's 3 businesses and 63 jobs. Now, why? I mean, how did that happen? And it's land control. It starts with the landowner and planning policy. Last year, I was asked by Kit Malthouse at Westminster, as the housing minister at the time, with all due respect, why do other people not build the quality that the Duchy does? And I had to say, with all due respect to the 6th housing minister in 5 years, that his previous incumbents hadn't cared about quality. It hadn't even been talked about since John Prescott. And that's very damaging to the industry at large. Also, with sites like these, and I hasten to add again, I do not know this site and I haven't visited it. And by all accounts, it is a well thought out housing development. But you can see the car dependency, you can see there's no commerce, you can see there's limited community. And I know that government sells sites like this, surplus public sector land, because government coffers have been empty, and that was basically the mantra under George Osborne, and it was accelerated delivery and not a lot else. I'm very pleased to say, of course, a lot of that's changing. And in Poundbury, it's been about an element of nurturing, for sure, with these businesses. We do speak as landowners to each other, and we all have to go through that difficult patch and the challenges of the first 5 to 10 years. But we have the critical mass at Poundbury, and we've created the kind of businesses and services that you'd like to live next to. It's worth repeating some of those statistics. They really are quite incredible. A lot of independent artisan businesses. Poundbury is a half an hour walk from the centre of Dorchester. You have to ask those businesses why. Oxford Brookes did. Why Poundbury? Why relocate? Why start a business on Poundbury? What have we done to create that entrepreneurship? And it's really just creating the place. We've created that place, the size of workshops, the units, if you like, that are accessible. The price point is correct, not because we're charitable, but because the high street's 25 grand a year plus business rates, and you can afford it if your cost of coffee. That's where the footfall is. Poundbury doesn't necessarily have that footfall. Some of them, though, thrive. Some of them just survive, but they're still in their own little heaven. But it's a quality place. It's an accessible price point because that's the footfall. So we get the artisan independent coffee maker, not Costa Coffee. Poundbury wins. The price point I mentioned, yes, it's also the flexibility of that lease. So we will have rent-frees, short-term leases. It's the ease of parking, but mainly it's just the fact that it's an attractive place to be for them, for their customers, and the symbiotic nature of that when you have the mixed use with the offices that use the galleries, the cafes and so forth. It's tenure blind. It's the vibrancy and vitality of place. It's all the best places you know in that regard. Everyone should be able to walk down the same street. The shared services do help. It's a pleasant place to be, to visit, to walk. People are forced to think about other road users in the cars, and it is designed around the pedestrian rather than the car. Now, I think apparently 22% of people walk to work in Poundbury. That's because about 40% live and work there, depending on which statistic you derive. There's been various studies of Poundbury, but I'd say approximately about a third of people do live and work in Poundbury, those of working age, of course. This is Queen Mother Square. You wouldn't build this in your first 5 years, and it only worked because we share in risk and reward with partners. Now, the Duchy owns the whole of this square, and 5 years ago, the Duchy didn't hold any commercial, and I was very, very surprised with that. I'm not laying claim to it. This decision was already made, and it was His Royal Highness, as usual, being the driving force behind this. But this square now provides about £1 million per annum income, which is a 20th of the Duchy of Cornwall's income towards His Royal Highness, and that means the contribution that we make to his public, private and charitable lifestyle, and we are the sole source of income for the heir to the throne and his family. So it's an incredibly important statistic and point to make. Although if you speak to my finance director, he would say, not another Buttercross, please. Ben Murphy, and me looking at Ben Pentreath, who designed it. But absolutely we need the Buttercross. So the Buttercross is the building here on your left. And on a spreadsheet, it's £500,000 because of the landscaping outside and so forth. It's a single-storey dwelling, double height. He's going to have to sell a lot of croissants before I can talk about improving his rent for the Duchy. But actually it makes that whole area. Of course it does. That square is a beautiful place to be. The footfall isn't that high, but those businesses are in their own little heaven, and you know, it is a miracle in some ways that it exists at all when you understand the area. But from the Duchy's point of view, there's added value in all of this. The return on investment is higher, and it's not a prince's folly, and that's a very important distinction to make. And again, there's different reports from University College of State Management with the foundation. We've had Savills talk about a 27% uplift in the house prices in Poundbury. More recently, the Knight Frank report for the Commission focused on a figure of 77.8%. Now, our build costs are maybe 15 to 20% higher than the average. There's not many comparables to make in Dorchester, but when you consider the high-density, mixed-use nature of Poundbury, you realise we get an uplift of about 55% on our land value, and that's according to Knight Frank. So it makes good economic sense. It's important, as I say, a point to emphasise to some of the landowners in the room here, and reassurance, I hope. With the green space, we talk about, I think, the opportunities for access to nature. We have in the urban form, the integrated bird boxes and the bee bricks. What we don't have necessarily, Kim, is the green lungs through the development, and there is a tension there. I have to be honest with you. I don't know if Poundbury would actually be designed in the same way now if you had to have, for instance, a packed corridor, you know, a green lung through the scheme. But the principles behind it are sound, which is that if you have too much green space in development, you become suburban and you become car dependent. And I don't have the answer for that. But I think, and I hope we're trying to learn that we have enough green space on the outer edges of our high-density urban form. This is the economic impact report of 2018 by Dorset Council. I just want to home in on that first figure there, £100 million per annum in goods and services that are spent in Dorchester because of the mixed-use nature of Poundbury. Again, that doesn't include the construction, which is the other figures down there, the 236, but just in the very being of Poundbury, in the very nature of it, there's £100 million per annum in goods and services spent in the local area. So you live, you work, and you spend in the same area. There's not enough time to go into detail on any of these, and there is one missing. That's a supportive local planning authority. And that thread must go through from the strategic director to the, if you like, the senior planning manager down to the planning officer. Now, they ebb and flow. We've had them at critical times in Poundbury, and that's been incredibly important. We have them now in Nans Leddon. And if we don't, it's water uphill. It really is. And you're wasting a lot of time, blood, sweat, and tears, to be frank. You really do need that. But otherwise, the reference to the single landowner, you could replace that if you know your north and you're a multiple of landowners, as long as you have a commitment to quality outcomes, that includes the house builders, some of which are in the room here today and have a long-term relationship with the Duchy. That matters. As long as there's that genuine commitment to quality outcomes, you don't necessarily just need to be a privileged landed estate. But I just wanted to focus on that. Also, we are learning. The AD plant is the first and still the most efficient biomethane gas to grid plant in the country, and provides natural gas from renewable source of break crops to about 80,000 homes in the summer and about 9,000 homes in the winter to the whole of West Dorset. And indeed, it powered the electric bus, which was the first electric bus in the southwest, but rapidly became the least reliable. So they don't exist anymore. They were quietly sold by the council, and now there's some diesel hybrids in its place. So we haven't got it all right. And then the challenge with this beautiful facade, and I'm working really hard to try and find a solar slate, because no one wants to place solar on that beautiful mansard roof. But electric is the future. Solar is the future. Ground source and air source heat pumps are expensive. And if you put them in the ground, you'll have someone telling you can't put the tree pits in, for example. And those are the challenges we face. But we're grappling with all of that, and hopefully we're listening. We do take stock. We do ask people, how are we doing? What's missing? What could we be doing better? And hopefully through that process, as I say, we're learning. And thank you very much for listening.